Well, today we are going to discuss a modal called ought. Most of students have doubt on this modal, so I make a video on this modal verb called ought. Ought modal verb is an exception to the rule of modal verb. It means there is some rules of modal verb. The rules of modal verb is the modal verb always followed a base form of verb after it, but the ought modal never follow base form of verb after it. It followed a preposition called to, so we called ought to. How to use ought to in a sentences? In positive sentence, subject plus ought plus to plus verb 1. In negative sentence, subject plus ought plus not plus to plus verb 1. Interrogative sentence. What do you mean by interrogative sentence? The sentence which is used to ask question. In this sentence, how you use ought to? Ought plus subject plus to plus verb 1. So please note down it. And we know ought is a modal verb. It means it has some meaning. Okay. If your meaning of your sentence is moral obligation, if your meaning of your sentence is desire for something to happen, if your meaning of your sentence is advice, so at that time you use ought to as a modal verb. Okay. What do you mean by moral obligation? First of all, you have to understand what do you mean by obligation. Obligation means responsibility. There are mainly two types of obligation. One is formal obligation, one is moral obligation. Formal obligation, the responsibility which must be followed at school, office, industry. But moral obligation means the obligation, the responsibility. If you born as a human, you have some responsibility, and that responsibility is called moral obligation. We ought to respect our parents. If you born as a human, you have to respect your parents. Every citizen ought to follow the rule. We ought not to smoke in school. We know school is a learning places. This is not for smoking. So this is the, if you born as a human, you have to know that we ought not to smoke in school. Desire for something to happen. It means आप चाहते हो ये हो. आप चाहते हो इंडिया मैच जीत जाए, तो at that time you use ought to in your sentences. India ought to win the match. He ought to apologize. She ought to have studied science. He ought to have exercised daily. If you are giving advice to someone, in your sentences you use ought to. You ought to exercise daily. You ought not to drive fast with me. And these meanings also shown by should. And this is a question for you. Is it possible to use should in place of ought to? So please write down your answer in a comment box. So thank you.